Hey guys, my name's Brian. I'm a developer at Pantheon, and today I am just going to run you through an educational video that I want to see if it actually works. That was not a sentence. Anyway, okay, so here is our friend Bob. He is a person just like you, with emotions and a family, and yeah, we're gonna pull off his head today. So, oh my god, sorry Bob. Here's his brain. And this is the human brain, and it has a couple parts that are worth noting. So there's this kind of divide down the center. It's called the central sulcus, and it divides the two halves of the brain. There are a couple other regions to kind of look at. There's the parietal lobe, which is this part of the brain, which kind of processes sensory information. I mean, makes sense. The ears are, I'm going to put Bob's head back for a second. So the ears are here, and sensory processing is done right below them. Weirdly enough, the part of the brain that processes vision is actually in the back of the brain. It's called the occipital lobe. It's right here. And I'm going to put Bob back for a second. So actually, the eyes have this cord. I'm just going to build it really quick. Called the optic nerve that runs from the back of the eye. Just one second here. Runs from the back of the eye here all the way to the back of the brain. And these nerves actually, that's totally not how the optic nerve works. Anyway, so it runs through the brain, hits the bottom, and kind of synapses onto the back of the brain, the occipital lobe. Okay, there's Bob. And yeah, those are the key points of interest. There's like all the autonomic functions, just basically the stuff that works without conscious thought. It's all taken care of by the medulla, which is part of the brain stem. And this is the spinal cord here that runs down and controls the body. So yeah, it's the human brain in a nutshell. You may ask, how the hell does that actually work? Just looks like a bunch of colored pieces right now. And that is true, but I'm going to break it down a little further for you. So if you follow me, I'm going to fly to this next room where I set up a neuron, which is the basic unit of the brain. Okay, so you may ask, what the hell is this? This is a neuron. These are the basic cells that make up you, essentially. It doesn't look like much. There are just a couple regions of interest you should care about. The cell body, which is full of, if you've ever seen a drawing of a cell, it's full of the regular organelles. I can make some of them really quick for you. Think of mitochondria. There are kind of these oval things that make energy. I'm just going to scale that down, throw that in. There's endoplasmic reticulum. In general, just all the parts of a cell to keep this thing alive. So a neuron's main function is to conduct nerve impulses from the top of, these are called dendrites, from the top of this cell really quickly down to the bottom. A good question is, why would it want to do that? Well, that's how it computes. And you may ask, okay, what does that even mean? All right, so let's walk you through this. So generally, neurons don't exist alone. They exist in networks. So in the brain, you'd have, this is just example, a 2-neuron example. But in the brain, there are, billions, 100 billion actually, of these neurons, all of different types and sizes, and they all look different. Anyway, I digress. So basically, you have this neuron, and it would kind of conduct, if this one got a signal from another neuron and it fired, it would conduct its nerve impulse. I'm just going to use this as a kind of a demonstration. it would conduct its nerve impulse down from its top, down, all the way down to its bottom, and would release the signal onto this neuron, which would then conduct this down its length. Okay, that's pretty much the gist of it, and you might still be a little confused, but it's okay. I'm just going to walk you through a couple more details about how it actually conducts this impulse. You're just going to have to trust me on saying that the fact that it conducts this impulse is incredibly important. So it releases its nerve impulse onto this other neuron, which then conducts the impulse down its axons, called the axon. There are these sodium channels, which then suck in sodium, whoop, 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 and yes, absolutely needed sound effects, which causes the potential to change. And what that means is you get this electrical gradient down this axon, which is it conducting the impulse. And so if potentially the potential then reached the end of the neuron, it would conduct it to the neuron after it. So I'll just really quickly clone this one, and boom, it's now conducting into this long chain of things. All right, I'm just gonna fly you through a bigger network that I put together earlier. And so this is just an example of like what it would look like in a in your brain, essentially. There are neurons everywhere. They're all hollow, all conducting these impulses. Actually, I'm just gonna bust out this light, magic school bus style. Alrighty, so I'm traveling down the axon of this neuron right now, taking twists and turns. Imagine I'm the impulse, I'm being conducted, and I reach the axon. And so if I'm still the impulse, I would travel down its axon and pop out into the axon terminal, which is the end of its axon tree at the end. And so you may ask, what is this? Well, this is the secret of a neuron, and it's basically the most we know about how neurons conduct impulses. And so at the end of a neuron, there are these, you can see around me, I'll zoom out a little. These, so I have the soma, the cell body, axon, and axon terminals, these little nubs. So what they do is once an impulse reaches it, it will release neurotransmitters, which are stored in these little vesicle things, which then merge. One of them's merging with the synaptic cell wall, and is then squirting out all these neurotransmitters, yes, sounds gross, and it is, into the synaptic cleft. And so what it does, this is how it transmits it to the tree of the next neuron. It releases these neurotransmitters, which then cross the synapse and bind to receptors on the receiving neuron. And so suddenly you have these receptors that are allow sodium to then travel into the cell. Just going to kind of whoop, whoop, whoop. And these change the potential of the actual dendrites of the cell. Oh, I'm getting a little motion sick. Okay. Okay, so now that happens, you get like this mini potential that then travels down this dendrite, and potentially you'd have all these other synapses kind of conducting impulses. And if you get enough of them in one region, you get this impulse that travels down to the soma and then can be conducted down the axon. All right, I'm just going to, there's a lot more to know about the actual action potential and how impulses are conducted down the axon, but I'll get into that in another episode when I've actually built the models for it. Alrighty. So right now I'm just going to try to take you through the details of the synapse, which I find the most fascinating subject in neuroscience. Okay, so this is one of these axon terminals, and this is a dendrite of the other neuron. I've just kind of broken it apart to make it easier to understand and to visualize. All right, anyway, so the axon terminal on we call it the presynaptic neuron. So before this space right here, where there's nothing between these two neurons, is called the synapse. So presynaptic neuron just means it's before the synapse. It's an annoying fancy science term for something that's not that complicated, but it's science. All right, so potentially if this neuron had fired, and by fired I mean had conducted an action potential all the way down to this part of the neuron. Sorry, my water is boiling. I'll be back in a minute. Alrighty, I'm back. Sorry, something super important came up. I just had to put pasta in a pot. Anyway, so now where was I? So yeah, the impulse gets conducted to the axon terminal, and suddenly you have this influx of calcium, which normally is outside the cell, but once the potential reaches it, this special condition happens. These pumps, calcium pumps, open, or sorry, channels, and you get calcium that then diffuses into the cell. And this triggers a pretty complex series of events inside the cell. But in short, you have these vesicles that merge to the cell wall, and these vesicles are full of neurotransmitters. And if I forgot to, oops, daisies. I forgot to kind of show you what that looks like, but give me 1 minute. I can just make it really quick. Okay, so basically, if I delete one of these vesicles, you'll see it's full of neurotransmitters, which are green. I don't know why. And these things will, once these vesicles bind to the cell wall and release them, they release them into the synapse, which then, as I explained earlier, lock to receptors on the postsynaptic cell, again, after the synapse. And yeah, so the interesting part for me was that this is actually how a lot of drugs work. They block, oh wait, sorry, I skipped a step. Okay, so these things bind to these receptors, but they wouldn't bind there forever, or else you just have these neurons that are firing, and then suddenly the person's having a seizure, which is not good. So after a while, they unbind and are reuptaken by the presynaptic cell for recycling or just other uses. So yeah, they're uptaken. So the way some drugs work is they actually they put a block. They put a block on the outside of the cell. They kind of stick themselves to the membrane, and when these things are trying to be reuptaken, they just kind of bounce off. And so eventually they'll actually rebind and create another potential in the postsynaptic cell. And when they unbind again, they just bounce off. And that is not good. It's actually what cocaine does And cocaine is bad. You should never do it unless your friends are telling you to, and you don't want to appear lame. So yeah, then you have to do it. Anyway, bad joke. Okay, so here we go. Have all these neurotransmitters now, and yeah, they're prevented from being reuptaken. Yeah, that's basically the gist of cocaine. Yeah, that was my first take.